Well, let's go ahead and get started. As you all know, I'm Andrew Black. We're kind of talking today about, a little bit what it means to be a climate smart congregation, why this is important. But of course, want to just take a chance to kind of open us in prayer and kind of center ourselves here because there's a lot of good information today. But my hope is that information doesn't just stay in information. Information leads to transformation. Here we can get you a chair. Let me see if we can get a few more chairs in here in 1 second. I think we're gonna have, if there's something laundry closet. Yeah, okay. There used to be some in here. All right. So let's see if I got the key. Dude, that's not it. Chairs there. Yes. Okay. There's a few other guys. Okay, cool. You get the drums. Today, really honored though to be joined by Rob Lochner. Rob and I have been good friends for years. We did a lot of work on Southside poverty work, affordable housing issues. Rob's wife Bonnie worked at Lochner Medical Center for years, opening up their Southside clinic. And Rob is the construction director of Habitat for Humanity. Also leading a national expert, leading the way on green building for Habitat, and not just net zero, but like negative HERS ratings for the Habitat homes. So obviously incredibly helpful for affordable housing. In Santa Fe, if you can reduce your expenses in living for families that are low income to almost nothing. And so Rob's leading the way nationally in that. But Rob also led the way in reforming and changing his church to be a climate smart congregation. The hope of today's presentation isn't just a lot of information, but of course the hope is that we also provide a chance for you all to center and kind of look at what can our congregation do to make transformative changes in the lives of our congregation, but also some of these things will apply to your own house. But with that said, let us start the prayer. Loving God, you are a God of abundance, God who has blessed us with creation. Your creation erupts your grace, your beauty speaks to your wonders. We give you thanks for such things, but we also don't just give you thanks. We know that we too have a duty to be responsible stewards of your amazing creation. We give you thanks for your Son, who collected all of the bread remaining from your loaves and fish story, reminding us to waste nothing, but to be good stewards of the resources that we have. Thank you for all these things. Amen. So, that said, I want to frame today's conversation. I think before you jump into a bunch of facts and information, it's important for us to look at a little bit of the basis on why do we care for creation, and I want to explore that a little bit with you. Would somebody mind reading the bottom part under the aspens? Just kind of read those 3 quotes.
Creation is the theater of God's glory. Amen. The earth is the land of the Lord's, and all that is in it. Psalms 24. As caretakers of God's creation, called to tend the land, water, and air with awe and wonder at God's gift. Use the earth's resources wisely, without plundering, polluting, or destroying them. Use technology in ways that preserve and enhance life. Measure our production and consumption in order to provide for the needs of all. PC USA, Book of Order, W5, 0305.
Anything striking about these 3 quotes? Anything that jumps out to you or sticks you?
Well, the phrase plundering, polluting, and destroying is fairly strong.
Just temporary steward, how long you got. Earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, right? A very different understanding of this is ours and we're going to do what we want with it. God is the landlord and we are the tenants. I'm not sure if the landlord's overly pleased right now. What else? These are all very Presbyterian. pieces too, right? Calvin, obviously founding of the Reformation. A lot of our Presbyterian church heritage draws back to Calvin. And speaking about the theater of God's glory, it's an amazing creation. It's something to just stop and find wonder at. I took this picture at Aspen Vista. And if somebody like me can take a picture like that, it's speaking to that theater of God's glory, right? And then, of course, you have PCUSA's stance in our directory of worship and from our book of order. On kind of being, what does it mean to be stewards of our creation? So this is deep within our DNA, right? It's part of our Reformed heritage, part of our biblical basis, but it's certainly also part of how we organize ourselves in terms of government and order. And also we should guide our worship, right? That we are grateful for this creation, that it is an enormously important gift that God has given us. And it is a gift to be cherished and stewarded over, right? And that's why it occurs in the directory of worship, ironically, that this should be guiding our worship. And we should be entering worship each day being just very from the beginning thankful for God's creation, right? Would somebody mind reading that quote on the right-hand side?
For all creation stands on tiptoes, my favorite translation, stands on tiptoes to the children of God whom is their subjected to utility, not of its own will, but by the will of one subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its enslavement to the decay and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning together as it suffers together the pains of labor.
Don't make this quote from Romans 8. What do you make of this quote from Romans 8?
Sounds like we've had these problems for a long time.
Yeah. The will of the one who subjected it. This is Paul talking about the fall from Eve, right? That we have gotten ourselves out of line with creation. We've gotten ourselves out of line with the Creator, and everything else is essentially paying the price now for that sense of getting out of line, right? And it's enslavement to decay. And so this is an interesting passage to reflect on theologically. The creation bears the brunt of humanity's sinfulness. Creation is enslaved and experiencing the decay of our distance from one another, our distance from creation, and of course, our distance from the Creator through our false sin. And of course, what is creation doing? The whole of creation has been groaning together as it suffers together the pains of labor. Creation is waiting to give a new birth, a new Adam, right? As Paul will talk about in Romans. But it is groaning in labor pains as it tries to go toward redemption and reconciliation, yet caught in sin and brokenness and dysfunction. So creation pays the price for our problem. It's the essential thing Paul is saying in this text. So one of the things that obviously this whole course, there's been a lot on climate change. There's been presentations by Jen and Tony Arnold, and myself presenting a little bit on kind of all the facts of climate change. But I think one of the things I really want to emphasize this morning is there's a mentality, especially among older generation, that climate change is something that's going to happen. And I come to bring the news this morning that climate change is happening now. It is happening now, people. And this is something we have got to see as a church. This is not something, oh, I'm in my 70s and I don't need to care about this because I'm probably going to be passed away. And I don't need to deal with this, and other generations have to deal with it. This is happening in real time. Let's just look at what happened this year. In 2023 alone, we experienced the hottest June worldwide on record. July 4th was the Earth's hottest day. That got passed by July 5th and then July 6th, which then led to the hottest week in the world's history. Death Valley reached 134 degrees Fahrenheit. Phoenix has had 22, and we're still counting. So this is as of Friday, 22 straight days of 110. And there's not been a single night below 90 degrees. You can see this graph on the side. These temperatures have been measured since 1880. So we have, well over 100 and, close to 150 years of measuring the Earth's temperatures. And you can see, look at the spike as it hits the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and you can see those temperatures just going up over time. 10,000 records have been broken globally this year. 5,000 heat and rainfall records have been broken in the United States alone. Since 2000, 2 times as many records have been broken from heat as of cold. But people will say, well, there's also cold. Climate change doesn't mean that there's not warming. Warming is still occurring. But, you can have extremely cold days. You can have a lot more warm days. What this is saying is there'll be a lot hotter days that are happening. Twice as many, matter of fact. You have record heat in places like Spain, Portugal, and Africa. And scientists are able now, because they're looking at things like El Nino and other weather patterns, to say these are definitively 100% more likely caused by climate change. Drought in Africa has left 20 million people without food this year. 20 million people are without food in Africa and have enormous food and water instability. There's been over 100 heat-related deaths. That was as of a week ago. Yesterday, I don't know if you saw the news, 18 heat-related deaths in the Arizona area alone. That's not including border deaths. These are people that they're documenting in U.S. hospitals. That's not people that are found on the U.S.-Mexico border. And just a month ago, they found 5 migrants that were trying to cross on the New Mexico side over by Summer Park, passed away from the heat stroke. Summer 2023 is the hottest that New Mexico has ever experienced. New Mexicans don't take one thing seriously on this presentation. It's going to be this fact. Our chili yield is 30 to 50% down. If green chili doesn't speak to your soul and the problems that we're going to have with our chili crop, then I don't know what's going to help you transform our climate. But I'm just saying to a group of New Mexicans, yeah, we're looking at a 30 to 50% less chili yield this year based on climate. 1/3 of all plant and animal species are now threatened with extinction. I don't know if you all saw the article last week about the New Mexico bird populations are seriously increasing, because the problem with birds is the 2 ways that they use to cool themselves. They flap their wings and they open their mouths, or they urinate on their own legs, which are often unprotected by feathers to try to cool themselves. Well, what happens when you flap your wings and you open your mouth? You're expending a lot of moisture out of your system. The birds are dehydrating, therefore they're also not able to pee on themselves. The birds by the flocks now are dying in our state because it's too hot and dry. Devastating wildfires, of course, in Canada, causing smoke issues all over the Midwest and the Northeast. Then you, of course, have the wildfires that hit New Mexico last year. And then you see a picture of the wildfires that hit Australia and the inability of species to, of course, adapt to that. So this is all going together. And I think that's one thing I really want you to see today. Climate change is not something that's going to happen. Climate change is happening now. Merely walk outside and start feeling the 98-degree heat in Santa Fe. Growing up in this town, I cannot tell you when I ever experienced anything above 90. I mean, you're seeing these changes starting to shift. That's a look at weather, but weather obviously impacts over time. Climate. Any questions on that slide? All right. So I'm interested in, why address climate change from a Christian perspective? If I were to ask you as a Christian, why should you care about climate change? What would you all say? What's that? Matthew 25?
Good stewardship. It's a good steward.
Okay, good. So tell me about Matthew 25. Why?
It's healing people. It is healing people across the world. It's just an atrocity that we have a responsibility to care for others.
So when you fed the hungry, and there's 20 million people in Africa that are now without food and water. Yeah. Right. What else? Why care about climate?
Well, I come back to the concept of stewardship, and I think it was you who was telling me when I asked you 5 years ago, where does the conservation ethic rise in the Bible? And you were talking about that, and it's the good shepherd, the good steward.
Yep. The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it's not ours, right? We're caretakers of it, but it's not ours. No. What else? If I were to ask you, you got to go out to the general public. You're going to be on a radio station this morning. Tell us about why you should care about climate change as a Christian.
I remember listening to a wife of a pastor that goes out in congregation in very conservative areas, where they don't believe in climate change. They think it's a hoax or it's some whatever. And she would start her discussion and she would say, well, I'm going to ask you what is God's greatest gift to us? And they said, well, forgiveness in Jesus Christ, number one. Then she said, what is the second greatest gift? And think about it. This earth, this world, right? And they don't think about that, a lot of times. We don't think about that. And taking care of that and taking care of people.
For God so loved the world. We like the evangelical side of the church loves to quote the second half of that, John 3:16. But I want you to think about it. For God so loved the world. Stop there. think about that and our evangelism. You know, that is a John 3:16 at every football game in America, right? And yet we go to, you know, where he sent his son and we get into the saving piece. We don't even think about that first part of the verse, right? For God so loved. That's why God sent Jesus. We love the world. Are we living into that ethic? Do we really want to, you know, wrestle with that scripture? So here's what you see. Some people come at it from a responsible stewardship of God's creation, and there is a gift from God, you know, and these are results from huge polls. 74% of religious Americans consider the earth sacred. 80% of religious Americans have a sense of stewardship, a duty to care for creation. Others think, you know, I want others to see how we're caring for creation, and it's important that our faith gives a good witness on this, right? Others are saying, you know, it's about financial stewardship. You know, we're going to have to install heavier air conditioning. We're going to have to deal with all these facilities changes. We're going to try to save money for other missions, and we're going to talk about that today. The other piece is you're going to talk about protecting humanity for future generations. So the majority of studies coming out in the state of New Mexico are saying that our state will increase 5 to 7 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a statewide from 2040 to 2070. That's a massive increase in a 30-year span. This is not something far away. You all have children, grandchildren in their lifetimes. They will see. Imagine Santa Fe being 105. You know, no longer up at 98. Albuquerque, I was in there on Thursday, 109, 116 in Albuquerque on that range. See the wildlife crisis. This one is really shocking. You look at this graph. This is from the 1900s, and this is world natural disasters. Look at the spike in natural disasters that you're seeing. You're dealing with bigger hurricanes, bigger tornadoes, more floods, more wildfire, more instability. Just right there graphed out. You can see the huge change. And then, of course, you know, as Drew was mentioning, what are the impacts to human life on this? What are the climate refugees? What is the lack of water, the lack of food? You know, how do we deal with the social justice crisis that's occurring on our Mexican border as people are dying literally out on their border with no water, no food? Kids are having heat stroke. I mean, the stuff is unbelievable. Interesting thing, too, that I found fascinating is 68% of Americans say anxiety, what they're now calling eco-anxiety, about climate change is impacting their mental health. They have a whole term for it now, eco-anxiety. 68% of Americans. 47% of 18 to 34-year-olds experience daily stress over climate change. What does it mean for the church to offer pastoral care in this? How can we be relevant? What is the reason people are feeling so much anxiety? Part of the reason people feel anxiety is you have to feel powerless. You can't do anything. Well, what if the church becomes a hub for people to actively engage and be productive and helps them care for their mental health? Isn't this some shocking concepts, right? That we can send you in a direction that's helpful. We can care for your mental health. We can care for your family, and we can care for your future. That sounds a lot like what Jesus was trying to do. This is a fascinating slide to me. The majority of U.S. adults believe climate change is the most important issue facing society today. 56%, well over any other issue. This is from Pew Research, of course. 71% of millennials, that is your 25 to 40-year-olds, say it's the most important issue. 71% of them. Only 57% of boomers, though. Why is that?
Not
Not my problem. Good luck, future generations, right? It's shocking how you see that swing, right? We're going to have to live with it. You don't have to live with it, not your problem. And yet, it's a problem, as I'm pointing out, that you all are currently living with today. This is not something you can say, oh, you're going to deal with. You're going to have to walk out in Albuquerque and experience 109, right? 70% of Americans wish they could do more on climate change. This is a good indicator for the church. There's a sense of feeling of helplessness. There's people want to take action. They want to know what to do. They want to make a difference. 51% of Americans don't even know where to begin. This is a great opportunity for churches to start to say, you know, we want to send you in the right direction. That's part of the reason we're doing this Earth Summer Series, right? Climate change is a serious problem. 50% of Christians say that. So less than the American public as a whole. 55% of mainline Protestants, that's your Methodists, your Presbyterians, your Lutherans. So we're right about where the American public is. 34% evangelicals, though. Right? Not probably shocking that conservatives see this as a political issue. That's not their problem in many churches. What's even more fascinating, though, is 68% of historically Black churches. Why do more Black churches care about this issue than your typical white churches?
They're getting back and more.
Bingo. It goes back to that last slide. Climate change is impacting disproportionately neighborhoods of color, communities of color, lower income communities. Many of you may say, oh, well, I have a second home, I can go to so-and-so, I can leave. And of course, then you can, move to a cooler climate. What happens when you're in the ninth ward of Louisiana and a big hurricane's coming? You may not have a car, you may not have transportation. Those churches are feeling this. Look at that number, 68% historically Black churches. I think what's really interesting, if you look at these other two graphs on the side here, climate should be a top priority to ensure sustainable planet for future generations. Millennials and Gen Z, that's, younger than 40 essentially, they're at 71 and 67%. How many of you all think the church needs to get younger and we need to have more young families and young adults?
This one.
Every single person in this room. And yet, how are we addressing the number one concern that young people and young families are wrestling with? You all see the challenge and issue, right? Talked about the need for action on climate change at least 1 to 2 times. Look at that. 67% and 61% of younger generations are doing that at least twice a week. If young people are talking about this issue, how much are we talking about it from the pulpit? How much are we talking about it in our Sunday school? How much is the church across the country talking about this? This is part of the reason I formed Earth League, right? Part of the reason we're doing this Earth Summer Series is we want young people, we want young families, but they're going, are you relevant to us? Are you understanding what my concerns are? Do you understand my eco-anxiety that I'm raising a kid whose world is on fire? What are you doing to help me navigate that, church? Is what I think the question. All right. So here's the interesting Pew result. This is where it gets really fascinating with religious communities. Overall, religious Americans are less worried about climate change than the general public. Is their conclusion. Most Christian congregations, climate change is not a major focus. Among U.S. adults who attend religious services at least once or twice a month, only 8% they hear quite a good bit and a good deal about climate change in their sermons and in their congregation. Obviously, our church is trying to be an aberration on this. You all are going to hear it a lot. I'm doing my best to sow those seeds as much as I can. But contrast that against the majority of Americans think climate change is the most important issue. So you're not hearing it in the churches. You're not talking about it in the churches. Yet the majority of Americans are saying this is the number one issue facing the society. Just 6% of American congregants say that they talk about climate change with other people in their congregation a great deal or quite a bit. Highly religious Americans are less likely to view inefficient energy practices as morally wrong. That one fascinates me. What do y'all think of that? Why? It says highly religious Americans are less likely to view inefficient energy practices as morally wrong.
Well, I didn't know those evangelicals that aren't really concerned about.
Yeah, God will take care of it.
Yeah,
We just do what we want,
exactly.
right?
As we always have.
Yeah. God will figure it out. God's in control. There's a little free will here.
Andrew, can you talk about the garbage can?
Yes, I would love to talk about the garbage cans. What is our witness? So when this is in front of our church. I tell Harry this all the time. We've got one compost bin on the far left, one recycle bin on the far end, and 7 trash cans going out. And if you're in the community and you're driving by this every day, when's the pickup, Marie? Wednesday, every family from the CDC, anybody who's driving to the city of Santa Fe to the county are seeing that. What are you all thinking about this church?
How many of those are CDC diaper related? Almost all of them.
And food related, right? We're going to talk about that. Food related, diaper related.
Don't get me going on that.
Okay, we're going to get you going on that. We're going to get going on that. But think about that. If that's your witness, does that look like good stewardship of creation? One compost bin, one recycle bin, 7 trash cans in between every week. I mean, I'd not just look at the picture, let it speak to you.
Hey, I can get rid of that real quick. Church wouldn't like it.
Yeah.
Second floor is used for something else.
Oh, well, we could talk. We got to talk about balance and reformation. This is a reformation on the track. But this is interesting. This is where the cognitive dissonance, right? Think about this. Majority of churches don't care as much about climate change as the general public. Yeah, 80% of religious Americans have a sense of stewardship. What's that happen? What does that mean? I'll give you an example. When I was in law school, I led the AIDS walk in Louisville, Kentucky. We had about 2017 that I personally got to be a part of this. A lot of churches, a lot of legal community. I was worried. Legal community, like no one signed up. to give donations to be sponsored for this walk. Churches, oh yeah, AIDS is bad, really concerning social justice issue, Matthew 25, banging the pulpit, got to participate in the AIDS walk. When the rubber meets the road, lawyers who weren't banging any of the pulpit all showed up and gave a ton of money. The churches, presence was incredibly weak. Actions speak louder than words. St. Francis, right? Preach the gospel always and when necessary, use words. We're great at talking about how responsible stewardship should be. Are we living that out? Do we match the American public around us? Are we willing to take our action? Drew, in your generation, how much of your peers look at whether the church is a hypocrite? All of them. Okay. Right? So you're sitting there and you got your 7 trash cans, your 1 compost bin, your 1 recycling bin, and you're going, we should be good stewards of the earth. And they're going to look at things like that and go, that doesn't seem quite right. This is just what I expect in the church. It's full of it, right? And on, from the sex scandals to everything else will be the reasons and justifications to you all are saying these things, but you're doing these things. And that will kill you in younger generations that don't have as much institutional loyalty, that don't care about membership, right? So we always want young families, we want young people to be involved, but we're dealing with this. How do we do this? So what can we do? And this is why I, worked with the New Mexico Interfaith Power and Light. They sent scientists from Los Alamos National Lab, retired scientists from Lab, come look at our church and do an energy audit on our church. What kind of, what is the energy usage? What are we doing right now? How do we make key reforms? How does that impact climate? How can we become more water wise? Is there ways that we can do robust recycling? You'll see down in the church basement by the elevator, we recycle old tennis shoes. We recycle food pouches from kids. We recycle used toys from kids. We recycle used children's clothing. None of that stuff is easy to recycle stuff. Earth Keepers and Jen and I and Marie have all kind of taken it upon ourselves to say, you know what, we can work with TerraCycle and some of these other organizations so the church can be a hub of this, right? We're not going to just recycle your tin can. We're going to try to recycle other things that can be recycled. Just got to know how to do it. We're going to try to start those programs at the Children's Museum. We're going to try to start those programs at the Interfaith Shelter, and I'll talk a little bit about that too. We've got our rooftop and our, idea of wildlife gardening and how to make our grounds more friendly to wildlife and pollinators when 1/3 of species are going extinct. And then how do we teach younger generations? Jen right now with our Earth Summit series is doing an 8-week series with kids on the environment. How do we care for the environment? Wanting to teach kids early on, this is part of our faith. This is not something we do in addition to our faith, that being eco stewards is core to our identity. Congregational tragedy. This is something definitively at work at First Pres. How much is our energy bills every month? Anyone know? Big shot? No idea.
30 grand.
Okay, for a year, yeah. Out of the year, and we'll talk about that. Every one of you is sitting under the lights that are being fueled by that energy. Every one of you are going to go get that water fountain and drink the coffee and use the elevator and benefit from that energy. Yet no one really knows how much they're using in common, right? This is the tragedy of the common. Everybody is using things. No one knows who's responsible. Who pays the bills for First Pres on there? Keep the PNM and the gas tank. You know? Right? But you all are beneficiaries of this. You all are using the common resource. The CDC is using the common resource. The staff are using the common resource. Yet no one is responsible when no one's responsible. Right? Everyone just assumes it's going to get done. The lights will stay on. We don't have to worry about it because I don't use it that much. So everyone thinks like that. And then what happens? The resources are depleted. The overall pays the whole, right? Pays the price of the whole. So here's what the EPA says. If every house of worship nationally, about 300,000 cut back energy use just by 10%, you'd save $200 million that could be used for other mission and ministries. 5.4 billion kilowatt hours of electricity. We'll talk about what all that means. And 200 million tons of greenhouse gases will not be emitted. That's the equivalent of 400,000 cars off the road or about planting 500,000. That's just a 10% reduction across the country for congregation. So I'm literally working with one of the biggest congregations in Denver right now on this. If I can make a dent here, I can make a dent there, you're going to start to see bigger shifts. But that's part of the mission of Earth Keepers is right now providing all these climate consultations. Average worship facility can save up to 30% on energy through no-cost actions, strategic vision, and smart operations and maintenance. What does that mean?
We stop using the lights that are above us. We probably turn our thermostats up in the summer and down in the winter. We probably would make sure
that all of the windows in this church are really helping to keep sun out,
Yeah.
air in. We're probably looking at all the doors to
You see
make
the crack
sure.
in the door right here? Fun in the winter. All you at the early morning service on Wednesday morning prayer, love that crack, don't you? Our single pane windows here. Yeah, we've got challenges, right? And those are bigger changes that can be made, but biggest one's behavior. Turn off the lights. You know, don't leave the auto running. You know, these kind of things, you know, don't crank the heat up and then walk away and the building's hot. And then the next person goes, it's too hot, cranks it all down, right? These are just behavior changes. They're saying 30% can be dealt with just by behavior. So we did this energy audit. Bring in these scientists, bring in these expert building experts, scientists from Lano. They come in and they assess our church. The first thing they want to look at is what is your current use of energy and how much are you paying? So you can see these graphs show monthly expenses from 2020 to 2023. You can see our electricity. This is just electricity. Is at about $23,000 in 2020. You're at about, $21,000 in 2021 and 22. Okay. So our average annual cost from 2020 to 2022 is $22,178. When I'm a pastor and I'm asking you all to donate and be good stewards, I do not want you paying the PNM bill. No one gets excited about that. But if I come to you and say, I want to do a youth mission, I want to work with tribes. I want to, we want to get more kids involved in our work here. We want to do more on gun violence. We want to do more on creation care. You all are excited about that. You give it us. But if I say, would you mind giving me about $100,000 for the next 5 years to PNM? You're gonna be like, no, I got my own electric bill. I'm not trying to pay PNM. No one wants to give that money, but it's money we all have to raise, right? Money that we have to sustain every year. What's fascinating is what strikes you about these years and these graphs. And this is just our sum total.
Well, right over COVID.
Yeah.
And they're fixed costs. And we have an HVAC system that defies logic.
Well, and look, what's interesting is what was the church doing in 2020?
Not much.
Right. In 2021, for a good chunk of that. What's interesting is the CDC operated in 2020. Church was empty. The greatest expense was in 2020. So it makes sense. You have 100 kids coming in 5 days a week plus teachers, you're going to have the greatest use right there. But what's interesting to me is when the congregation came back and more people were using the building, what did the building do? It went down. How does that happen?
When did we start replacing lights and LED lights?
Well, we're still working. We haven't been doing that yet. We're working on it. Done a little bit, not enough, not near enough. Why does that happen? How does your bills go down when more people are using the building? Behavior. Yeah. Lights are left on. Somebody came in on Saturday morning, saw they were left on instead of being all the way till Sunday, right? More people use it, more people are responsible for it, more people start changing the behaviors. That shows you've got a problem, right? That's a good indicator. If more people use the building, your bills went down. How can you see that? You can say, well, maybe there was some higher cost of electricity. Maybe that's what caused it. And now you're looking at kilowatts and actual usage. That's a more objective standard, right? So this is actually how much energy we're using. You can see in 2020, 21, 22, and now we're at 2020. So we actually used more electricity. It wasn't just cost. It wasn't just peak hours. It wasn't all these funky things that PNM can try to do. You can actually look at the kilowatts and say we were using more.
And
Yeah.
not to try to argue your point, but during COVID, you remember that ventilation was key. And right through the winter, the windows were left open,
Yep.
knowing that it was going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
But the balance was we need to keep air moving.
Right. That's
It's
good.
behavior, but
Yeah,
it's
behavior. And you have to do that, right? You want to keep the kids safe. You want to keep the teachers safe. You have a duty to care for them. It was a challenging time. At the same time, you're not seeing these bigger reforms start to take really, right? You're seeing a little bit of a slip, but not probably as much as it could be. That's right. That's a great point. Average church electricity use, you see this is kind of what's going on nationally with churches, a lot on the cooling, a lot on the office equipment, space heating, miscellaneous. You got, death by kind of 1,000 cuts, so to speak. There's lots of different ways for churches to use energy, basically what this slide is saying. Our elevator, our lights, lights left on in the bathroom, they could be on a motion sensor. Those kind of things are going to lead to the sum total. So what's our congregational energy cost and carbon footprint? You're basically looking at 143,000 kilowatts or 22,000, dollars, every average. For 10 years, this would take 1,023 trees to sequester the amount of carbon produced for 1 year of electricity. So 10 years, those trees would have to be in the ground, fully functioning as trees to sequester the carbon use that we have for 1 year. If that makes sense. Heavy use when the pandemic was going on. Electricity prices have increased an average of 2.36 per year for the last 25 years. For First Presbyterian, that'll equate to $524 per year, but it's going to compound, right? You're looking at more money every year, compounding over time, potentially gets you beyond that 22,000 every year, right? Our electricity used for 1 year equates to 80 tons of coal used. Amount of CO2 produced in the average lifetime of 7 sedan cars running full time for 93,000 miles. Annual production is 480,000 pounds of CO2. And it's about the same amount of energy to power 14 homes. There's an average family of 4. That's 2,000 square foot for an entire year. To have that home, you could probably have about 100,000. We'll talk about that. Here's your gas cost. You're looking at about an average of 5,000 or 5,800 on natural gas. You can see some bigger spikes happening. Some of that's a gas leak. Some of that's problematic use, right, and our HVAC systems. You can see that going up. What's interesting is that we've already spent $6,300 on natural gas this year. We're well above our average already this year. We're probably going to be around the 10 grand area.
Why?
That's a good question. So do you have a sense of why that is? I think some of it was a leak, maybe, Marie. What else? Just thermostat? Thermostat. Yeah. I mean, you're looking at probably 10 grand this year on gas, and how to budget for that and think about that, right? It's complicated. But gas is going way up, and so we'll look at that. So here's your, you can see gas going up in the winter. I mean, that's heating is being used for gas, right? So you can see those spikes. I mean, you look at January through April, and then the summer months, almost no gas use. That's going to be like your Insta hot, smaller, kind of things for our gas use. I mean, almost zero. But then you get the winter months, crank up thermostats. There you go. So you're looking at about $30,000 total, but of energy use that we're doing. But here's your gas use: 101 barrels of oil consumed. Take about 10 years for 723 trees to sequester the carbon that we're producing on just 1 year of our gas. So 9.7 gasoline powered cars per year, about 5.5 homes for their energy per year. This is just First Press 1 year footprint, right? Now, this is the really interesting. Natural gas prices increased 77% 22. Don't remember that. They're very volatile market, right? You look at a monthly rate increase of just about 4% every month. You're looking at about 234 annual increase pounded over time for our church. You're going to be well over that $30,000 on it every year, just based on market trends and no. So here's your total cost. You're looking at $28,000 over that 3-year period. You have enough energy to power 20 family homes, 101 barrels of oil, 80 tons of coal, 1,746 trees for 10 years to sequester our carbon. This is what it would take for us to be carbon neutral. Keep doing what we're doing. Does that make sense? Any questions on these numbers?
How do we compare? I didn't say, how do we compare these to the other churches?
I'm glad you asked that. So in our energy audit, they've done about 23 other churches in New Mexico and in some other places around the US. These particular auditors. We came out of higher than the average. Some of it's our size of our facility, some of it's our usage, right? So they kind of noted that we weren't egregious, but we weren't great either, was basically what they said. The biggest thing is a lot of the other churches, and we'll talk about that, are starting to change their trends much quicker than we are. And so they're seeing huge decline in a lot of the other churches that they're working with. We'll talk about that here in a second. I mean, my question to you all is, okay, say we cut down that 10% to 30% just by changing the rate. You're talking 7 grand possibly. What would you use that money for? You could for mission and ministries. What are the things that you spend that on? Instead of P&M for the gas. What would you want to spend 7 grand, 10 grand on?
Raises for the staff.
Right, I like that. Hey, agree. Hear that? Get these changes done tomorrow. That's the way to get the staff on board. I love that. What else? Churches. Improvements in the churches, building facilities. Cuba. Yeah, think about 7 grand in money to Cuba. I mean, what would that do to people's lives? I mean, that amount of money is not a ton to us. It's still good money. Put that in Cuba or down on the border for our compassion kits. That's game changing money for families, right? And now we're just paying it to peanut and the gas. All right. So what did the energy audit? This is a little bit packed slide, but we'll get into it all. This is what the energy audit basically concluded. They looked at all that stuff I just presented, and this is what they said. Heating and cooling. We've got to regulate our thermostats. You all in facilities dealt with this a lot this week. Our thermostat regulation is way out of whack. They're recommending averages in the summer and the winter. They want things locked in at that because right now, somebody feels it's too hot, they crank it up. Somebody feels it's too cold, they crank it up. You got systems competing against each other. It's a hot mess. And this is like, look, this is a behavior change. This is something we can do right now, and you can save a significant amount if you start creating these ranges and dealing with it, right? And so they gave you the ranges. They said, this is what we'd like to see. They looked at all our systems. They think this is a significant saving. This is merely a behavior shift in the CDC, in the congregation. And this doesn't take any money, right? This just takes us figuring out how to use our system, work with carrier, saying we want these ranges, we want it to be consistent, and we're not going to go 85 degrees. I mean, when the audit was here, it was mind blowing. We had one CDC classroom at 85 and one CDC classroom at 64, right next to each other. No kids in either classroom. And they're like, what the heck? So, I think like there's some things that and I don't blame that on the CDC teachers. They want to keep their kids comfortable, right? But we got to figure out how the system can help that. We got to educate the teachers. We got to educate everybody on like, why are these changes important? There has to be a culture shift and a behavior shift. And it has to start with facilities. It has to start with a session of you all saying, look, we got to do this. Our witness isn't great. We're spending a lot of money. It's not good for the environment. Here's all the reasons we got to make these shifts, right?
Andrew, sure. I'm on the facilities committee now. We have, I don't know what is wrong with that HVAC system. We have put so much time and additional money in trying to achieve exactly what you want. I sometimes walk away from those meetings and want to bang my head against the wall in frustration and our inability to get conversations between the various companies that are involved in this to get where we want to be.
Yep, that's right. And I agree.
Well, maybe Rick and too, we talked to the carrier last Friday, and they went through our whole church and regulated the right way.
Right.
We've not been doing it right, and we thought we were, but he said, no, this is the way to do it at 2 or 3 degrees between high and low, and let it go.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with our system, he said, it's just one little thing and a good program in place. And that's it, and all this time. That's it. Anything else, Maria?
What the other said is, too many hands in the pot.
Yep. So you cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, it's very easy. You put lockable covers over every thermostat and you cannot adjust it.
And one of the
But you don't know what's creating.
I'm sorry.
You don't know what you're creating when you do something like that.
Well, I think that's the farthest extent, and I think we work on behavior change and education. And I think one of the big pieces that has to happen is people understanding all this, what it's doing. Everybody starting to take responsibility. No more tragedy in the commons, right? We got to look at all these things kind of together. But there's also some other ones like tinting. I just handed Bill from facilities the tinting. There's a great tint company we worked with. Jen and I, unfortunately, have gotten to know a lot of the tint companies in this town after kind of good and bad experiences. But you'll see on the tint that it'll tell you the amount of heat it reduces, the amount of UV it reduces, obviously the overall strategy of that. And that can be a game changer. If you do the south facing windows on the 2nd and 3rd floor, and you can figure out what range of tint you want and what that looks like, and they work on historical buildings, then you don't have as much sun coming in where they're running AC and they're running heat, right? On one side to the other. You got to kind of think about strategic things like that. That's fairly low cost and would probably also save a lot of your building and the interior that's just getting cooked in the sun, right? And your overall system. Energy efficiencies and lighting, obviously huge changes there, replacing fluorescent tubes, halogen lights, CFLs with LEDs. They're estimating that'll save us, right around $2,000 every year just by replacing the light fixture, but that'll be over time, right? You'll be saving on your energy side of things, but you'll also be saving that over time as energy goes up. And we'll talk about that. Rob's going to talk more about that. Installing motion sensors in key areas, right? Down by the elevator, the lights are often left on overnight. You can just have a motion sensor there. Somebody comes into that lobby and wants to use the steps of the elevator, motion sensor comes on. Same kind of thing on the bathrooms right here, right? you know, those bathrooms up on my office on the third floor constantly, and Marino, the lights are left on, the fan's also running. Install a motion sensor in there, 10 minutes, whatever, turns off, right? These are low cost kind of things. Rob will talk a lot more about that. And then of course you have turning off our AV system. I don't even know how that works, Harry. In our chapel, I'm not sure if we can. I tried to mess with it last week, but the AV system's constantly running. And figuring out how to do that and what that looks like. So you're just not, you know, having what they call vampire energy, where it's just sucking and nobody knows it's there, right?
The only thing I know about here, in the sanctuary, we're supposed to keep the sanctuary within 4 degrees
Right.
of whatever,
Because of the order.
because of the order. Whether we attain that or not, the swings and things that we do, I don't know.
Yeah, it's got its own kind of system. Toured the underbelly of the church. It has its own system. And I think they're pretty close on that. I think that that's actually been pretty well met. Good thing is, you know, good for forms have in our dishwasher that we did, the new commercial dishwasher that's washing all your reusable cups. Awesome. You know, about gallon and a half of water per 6 loads, and each load runs 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes. You can, that thing is amazing. I mean, we have water people from the city who actually want to come over on Tuesday to look at our dishwasher. So we're, you know, we're doing good. We just got to keep at where we're going, right? So switch. Okay, session obviously made some recommendations to the facilities committee. They want to see, you know, what's a plan for reform? What does that look like? And again, this needs to be an honest conversation and discerning conversation, faithful conversation. What is God's will in the midst of this? How do we get estimates for what tent would look like? How do we start moving forward on that? What do we need to know about the lighting? How do we work with Rob and his experience in construction around that? You know, what are the resources around us? Are there grants? There's a bunch of that I can tell you. So these conversations need to start happening, not just, oh, we don't know if we can do this. It's let's look into this and have a really honest conversation about what we want to do here. And what are those reforms? So, you know, finance committee is looking at this, session's looking at this, facilities looking at this. And Rob, I'm gonna hand it over to you for a couple minutes to talk about what you did with your church and how that worked and what were the processes and the politics.
Thank you all for being here, being interested in this for sure. Advancing.
You can advance it or yeah, just hit the button. Just use slides for this one. Yeah.
So, a little bit. So, yeah, I've grown up in construction and social work my whole life. I started down as a volunteer in Mexico when I came out of high school, and I got into construction and working with Ford down there. Did that, and then I went to social work in San Diego and to Santa Fe, where I met my wife. Been here for 30 years. Working in the private sector, building the trophy homes out there in Las Campanas and Suzuki and that kind of stuff. And then got back into more of the social work with Youth Works here in town, if some of you have heard of them. And then working with HomeWise, doing their home improvement division, doing a lot of insulation, repair, weatherization, energy efficiency, solar, that kind of stuff. And now currently I'm the construction director at Santa Fe Habitat for Humanity. Right over there with our longtime volunteers and others that have come out. And I've been there for 11 years. We have made a commitment at Habitat to move forward and do net zero houses, which Andrew's talked about, all electric homes. But at my church, my home church, where I've been a member for 30 years now, we are a smaller congregation, but we don't have the intricacies of your building and historic and all those things. So I do understand that and I'm familiar with those things as well. But what I can say is it can seem overwhelming, the issues. It can seem overwhelming. We have this gentleman right here changing out our lights, Carl Wolf. Carl's his wife was on the council with me about 5 years ago. And they came from another congregation, a little larger, different state. And they were willing to help that congregation become energy efficient and do all these things that we're talking about right now. And here's some of the hurdles. Everyone on the council, everyone in that congregation was, let's do this. This is a great idea. And 1 year went by and they did nothing. And 2 years went by and they did nothing. then 3 years, then 4 years, and then the wolves moved. And they came to our congregation and said, they're sitting on our council, and just the two of us said, hey, of the 7 council members, we said, you know what, let's get this done. Council said, yeah, sure, it sounds like a good idea. But we made it happen. And there are some naysayers, there's folks that, put the roadblocks up. But I think it's sort of like we're talking about, the Israelites leaving the Egyptians, leaving with Moses. There was a lot of them were afraid to do that, right? It seemed overly daunting. They were comfortable in their zones. We got to keep it comfortable. The church is nice and everything's, but these changes can be made, but they're not made overnight. Israelites 40 years in the wilderness, right? So it takes time and there's struggles along the way, but you can do it. We started out, and this is common practice, and we can talk about that too, is first thing you want to do is you want to lower those usage bills before you think about replacing windows or doing solar on your roof, which I look at you guys' roof and you have a very nice roof for solar. So, very good. What's that?
Which one?
Well, I also got the one with the TPO roof for the PVC roof, the nice white reflective roof, so I'm like that. It's a nice looking roof right there. Though I did ask Andy, there's some things on that roof which I don't understand what they are. So I'm going to check back with him on those.
Not alone.
What's that?
You're not alone.
Yeah, exactly right. So I could probably figure them out, but I said, that's the same question. The first step we did is we went and we replaced every light bulb in the church. That was the first step that we did. We did it with just our congregants. We didn't bring in any contractors or anybody like that. We looked it up. We figured it out. There's congregations have such resources, and we don't tap so many times. Carl worked in the Air Force. He's an Air Force veteran, and he did electronics in the Air Force. So he had a little sense of electrical. His instruction person had another sense of electrical. So we were able to go through and for $600 replace every light in the congregation. That reduced our light by 90%. Okay. And part of this is because we just didn't say, I'm looking back here, you got, a little silver tubes back there. Yeah, so all right. So, we went through and we said, well, it's when people design facilities, they're notoriously over-designed lighting. And LED bulbs, which are way superior to compact fluorescence, we were able to take out 4 bulbs and put in 2. Right? We were able to say, you know what, we have a light over here that we never even use. It's wasted. So we eliminated that. So we looked at not only those things, but the design. Now, we're not high-paid professionals for this. We're just taking a chance. Christians, we shouldn't be afraid to do these things. We should be able to take a chance. Maybe we do something that doesn't quite work out. We put the lockout boxes on all the thermostats. You're going to get pushback. We did that at Habitat in our facility, where, just by coincidence, when we bought our facility, you guys are familiar with the Restore? Have you been to the Habitat Restore? Yeah. That facility uses $30,000 of electricity. We went in there and we reduced it to $20,000. Okay, over the course of 2 years. Just lighting, and then some smart things like switches. We had fans that would come on. And people would turn the switch to me and realize they turned a fan on. It would stay on for weeks, right? We put those on motion sensors. When you walked in the bathroom, the fan came on, the light came on. After 15 minutes of sensing no movement, the lights would shut off, right? So we did those kind of things, right? Again, replace faulty things like that. But also, put your water heating on. You have gas water heaters, you have electric water heaters. How old are those units? Right? Yeah. Are there more efficient units to do? But here's the key. You take little bites and you chew one of them. Lighting's the easiest. Get that done, right? We did that. We went to lighting. Then we looked at our other systems and we said, you know what? We're going to move the next step. You can see up there, powered by the sun. Okay. We decided we're ready. We dropped that bill so much. We didn't have much more to drop it. We're going to go and do solar. We put solar on it. We installed it ourselves. Again, it's plug and go. How many of you grew up with, Rector sets and Legos and those kind of things and whatever? It's simple. You need to have some support of somebody who knows the ins and outs. But I'm offering here to be sort of we should have a co-op with churches, so help all churches in Santa Fe to move forward to become, electrically independent, those kind of things. Who did these? Well, Carl's up there again, myself, a couple other congregants, and then I put the word out to young folks. They wanted to see it. So we had people that weren't even a part of our congregation. We had about a half dozen of them that came out to see how we install solar. How cool was this? We did it in about maybe 5 hours, right? Now, we did pay a contractor, an electrician, to do the interconnect on our building, right? Just because we had to upgrade it, because P&M is not the friend of rooftop solar, of course. I say that being a preferred contractor, P&M. So we did that, and we got that done. Now we were producing more electricity than we could possibly use. So our next step, let's get rid of the gas appliances, right? Because you got to think of it this way. Electricity is more efficient than any gas appliance you have, right? Like we're going to electric cars, right? Because driving around with a power plant under your hood is very inefficient. So when you're heating water with gas, or you're doing your heating in your building with gas, which that's a big one here, but if you can replace those with an electrical unit, even if it's being produced at a dirty power plant, it's still better for the environment. Right? So we did that. So we got that done. So now, next thing we did, we replaced our water heating system with on-demand water heater electric. Right? We still have excess. So right now we just got bids. We're going to be switching over our 2 antiquated furnaces. We have 2 furnaces that serve our congregation, one for the sanctuary and one for the offices and the classrooms and the bathrooms and all that. Right? We're replacing both of those. We're going to just eliminate them and put in heat pump mini splits, which are way more efficient, way more controllable too. And we'll have those work in the congregation. And we're actually producing the electricity for those right now. So that's going into our P&M bank account, basically. So those are the things that we move forward, the little things here and there. We're struggling in Habitat. I think Habitat's more closer to what you're struggling here at the church. These big systems, like you're saying, it's hard to understand them sometimes. It takes time. But I will give you a little caution. We, for years, paid an HVAC company to come out and maintain our systems. We paid them good money. Change our filters every 3 months, right? I found out, because I was paying attention, that they were coming out and servicing at that time, the building we were in, we had 7 rooftop units. Only 3.5 were working. They were actually changing the filters on units that weren't even working. They were dysfunctional because the thermostat broke or the pump went out or whatever. They still replaced a brand new filter with another filter. At least I think they said they did. And we paid them. They didn't pay attention to that. When we moved to our new facility, and I think you guys need to look at this, your unit on the roof, right? That you guys have units on the roof. So you have a basement, much better. Ours were completely smashed closed by hail damage. There was no air moving through the radiators on those units. Their efficiency had dropped 70%. But yours is the basement, so you're protected from the hail, so that's a good thing. But you need to look at those things. Don't just take the expert's word for it, because that's not always, real time living with it and seeing it is huge. So it makes a big difference. Somebody have a question? So, yeah.
I'm interested in the recycling portion of some of the things that you replaced, like the light bulbs and the furnaces. That's something you're into. So how did that work?
So we took those to a recycling plant out to the center, recycling center. Yeah. And those are hard. They're hard to do those things, right? The mercury and all the fluorescents and all that kind of stuff. You have some fluorescent bulbs have ballasts. People don't know that. Those ballasts are actually using energy all the time, even when the bulb is not, lit up, right? So those kind of things, there's these inherent energies that you have that are, constantly in the background being used that we're not aware of. So you have to do audits on those and see about those.
Did you have to replace a lot of fixtures as well as bulbs?
No, we actually didn't replace any fixtures. We had 4-foot fluorescents for the most part, and then we had some cans like this. So like that guy right there, I pull it down, I get an LED trim, I figure out what the wiring is, and then I pop it back in place. Most can lights are very easy switch outs. You're talking $5 if you get it, 5 volt per light, something like that,
And the nice thing is Rob has volunteered his time to help us.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm happy to come in and look at this and say, this is what we do here.
Passion.
Yeah.
I'm also curious because this, you said, I mean, in your church, you did this with a couple of people and you took the initiative into that, but this is something our church is talking about and how easy is it to say to the congregation, sponsor our life, like do this, let's get people involved and have these conversations where people can feel they're part of the change that's happening. And then that continues forward through other opportunities with bigger appliances and bigger efficiencies.
That's a great point. So we sat down in our, at the council in our budget meeting, we got the, 7 people there. And we're talking about what's the cost? We want to do solar. And I've gone out, figured out we were going to buy the equipment. I can source equipment from a company. What would it cost us to pay for it? We're probably in $30,000, $35,000. We did it for $7,000 because we did it in the congregation. But the money, so what we did is we said, you know what? We're going to put it in the budget. We're going to take it was going to put us over budget, right? We looked at our, our donations, our offerings, and we said, we're going to do a faith budget here. That was paid for as soon as we let the congregation know in 2 months. People had brought in checks and did that as a special offer outside, So there was no issue because again, it's a concern that people are willing to do that. Beauty of those kind of things are once you do them, like it's sold, it's done. That cost has gone away. It's not a monthly bill we're paying anymore. It's the opposite. We're getting that money, right? And I think some people don't understand, like we talked about this. I always go to business and you did a good job of it. And I said, your household, if you're not paying the bill, you don't know how much you're paying, right? Your business, if I asked any business employee, they never know what they're paying. So educating yourself, knowing what that cost is, which they did, which is awesome. And then you can say, we can eliminate that in so many years, But the first thing is to take those steps, take that step of faith, decide we can do this. And it'll happen. It'll get done.
Well, and so one of the upcoming things is the positive energy solar is going to be coming out and talking to us. There's another solar company we're going to be having the environmental fair, numerous solar companies talking about your house. There's lots of ways to do this. And that's kind of my hope is get this conversation going, get the discernment going. What is God's will in this? Do we want to try to do it ourselves? Do we want to contract it out? How much money would be right? Those are all the faithful questions I think we ask and we wrestle with, right? It's Daniel wrestling kind of overnight with these things that we are called to wrestle with hard questions, right? And I think the other piece I would say is we also have to be aware of the trends around us. I mean, look at the churches around us. Westminster's got solar. United's got solar. Lutheran Church of the Servant's got solar. You've got, all these other institutions, and people are starting to join and be interested in those churches because of that, right? They're saying, do you have these things? What is your congregation stance on these issues? First Press Albuquerque's got it, right? So there's other folks that are, Westminster First Press, two of our closest churches in our relationship, all have the Albuquerque Journal did a big expose on First Press and solar and what's important with stewardship. But you're also seeing big things like Aqua's doing, right? The whole community, the city and county governments are all moving in that direction. Elite electric vehicle stations are occurring, right? People are going to start expecting those kind of things at places they park, right? So you got to look at the trend of what is going on in our community and kind of the bigger reality.
And being that example, then moves others in that direction. But if your one congregation goes and you guys zero out, is that going to change climate change? No. But by getting others to do it and being that example, that's what we're doing at Habitat. We're one of the leaders throughout the nation in Habitat on doing that low energy homes. And we are now causing other habitats to move in that direction because they're like, well, why aren't you doing it? People start asking that question. So it multiplies itself.
Yeah, and that's of course our faith, right? The hope is, okay, no one hides a lamp under a bushel basket. You see what's going on with Georgia South. They put solar in, Andrew's got solar, the church is now doing it. These folks are now composting, these folks are recycling hard recycle. This is kind of the hope of our faith, right? That it spreads and it carries, and then the collective impact is far greater than the individual parts, right? And I just want to, let you know there's money out there. So, I've talked to Bill yesterday about it. Interfaith Power and Light is going to be applying for a $200,000 grant for us to change out light bulbs and HVAC rip updates and things like that. There was $45 million in the latest infrastructure bill that got passed to nonprofits and churches. They're gonna be applying on behalf of like consortium of churches, and then we'll divvy up the money, and it'll be 80% will be covered, 20% will be covered by us potentially. We don't know if we're gonna get that. We don't know if that's got a shot or not, but at least saying, hey, we're open to this. And here's maybe the lighting, issue would be really, really helpful, right? PNM has a program right there. You've got, they've got reducing your use grants, $5,000 grants, PNM retrofitting rebates, building tune-up programs. These are all programs that PNM offers. They're grants, there's money involved, they'll do different things for free. These are all opportunities. There's one that I really, Marie, that I wanted to flag for you all in the facilities. They've got a program called PNM Building Operator Certification, nationally recognized certification program for facilities managers, including electrical and lighting system, HVAC, air quality, sustainability, energy conservation. They'll go to your place and they'll look at things and they'll help that facilities manager figure out how to use things best. Best is it's an $1,800 program. They'll cover the entire tuition. There's things like that out there that, Marie, great continuing education opportunity. You and Mike, and folks from facilities, many people think, man, it's out there. We're not even thinking about those kind of things, right? Energy Star will recognize our congregation. We make these changes. We submit it to Energy Star. They put us on a national website. They'll feature us as part of their Faithful and Cool Congregations network. Anytime we want to use the Energy Star logos, we can do that on anything. So there's a lot of stuff out there. I'm working with, there's folks in Texas that are working specifically as their mission ministry on solar churches. I told Bill Eckman this. I said, you don't start there. You don't think about, I'm going to buy 150 solar panels when you only need 75, right? That's a waste, and that's not a good use. What you want to do is you want to reduce your use, tighten the envelope, figure out how to change behavior. And then you say, okay, we've done all of that. Now we only need 60 solar. And we're not going to spend that money. But you got, you think in that way of an incremental change and strategic kind of development of how do you work towards this. But no one wants to go out and buy 150 solar panels because everything continues to waste energy, right? That's an expense for the church. That's not a good resource. You want to tighten things up and then start to have that conversation.
Yeah, I was gonna say, just take those steps, tackle a room, tackle the next room. People think about solar, they have to cover the whole usage. We're not at HomeWise, we got the $5,000 PNM grant, and we put in the infrastructure for solar on the roof. We put in 6 panels and the connections. We got that with 5,000. In the subsequent years, just add more solar. You don't have to do it. It's not all or nothing. It's starting by taking little bites of the pie so the pie gets smaller. Then you can tap.
And the other thing I would say is this technology and the policy has greatly changed over solar. So for example, right, there used to be no advantage to churches or nonprofits getting solar because there was no tax credits, for example. Now with Congress passed the Infrastructure Act, they can now allow the business to take advantage of the tax credits and they can pass that on to the consumer. The churches can actually have that passed down and it can be cheaper. The other thing I would say is, a lot of 5 years ago, they used to bolt solar to the roof. Now they're putting steel girders up or aluminum girders. They just mount it down. It's not actually in your roof at all. You don't have to change it in it. You can re-roof, you just remove all that stuff, re-roof, put it all back. It's really changed. And I think that's the other thing is I know this church thought a little bit about solar 5-6 years ago. The technology has changed dramatically. Panels are way more efficient, so you need less panels. They have microinverters on each panel. So if your microinverter goes out, it'll tell you which panel. I have an app on my phone that can watch the solar in real time. How much is each panel producing? What's the average production over the month? What's doing what? I can see if a panel goes out. So, there's amazing technology, and that's just on my home system. You have a more advanced system here, you can see all of those things. It'll tell you how much energy you're using and how much solar you're using, producing a day, and how much you're offset. My dad's system has that. So there's all kinds of, things that I think have advanced greatly. The last thing is I'll say Tuesday, the Green Chamber of Commerce, the city of Santa Fe, helping us with a little bit of a water audit. What does that look like? Are there ways we can reduce it? We're doing pretty decent on water. We've got a couple of leaks. But I think they're, curious as to looking at how our dishwashers did and giving examples to other folks, but also potentially saying, here's some things that could be smart for you all. And so we'll have that conversation with them, but that's again, all part of the information. Yeah. So let's see. And the last thing I would just say is a lot of this stuff applies to you all in your housing. And all the stuff that we're saying today about tightening your envelope, changing out your LEDs, dealing with tint. I mean, we put tint on our house, 3 big clear story kind of windows, and in my office that I thought we needed a split unit on because it was getting really hot. Now we don't need that split unit. Tin has been a dramatic change, and that room is no longer hot. So, you know, things like that can help with glare, they can help with UV, they can protect your furniture. And, you know, it's the whole thing that we fit to 5 windows, and it costs us $800 for massive amount of our house, and our energy savings and emissions. Yep, time for church. Happy to answer your questions.
Thank you.